Set up a scene for OBS recording starting from scratch. Obviously, I wouldn't start from scratch each time, but the steps for the way I like to set things up, which isn't the simplest way, but gives you an idea how I like to work. So I'm starting totally from scratch. I've got the default scene in OBS, and I'm going to rename that. I'm going to call that scene Raw Camera. And I like to have a scene which is created. I'm going to add a video capture device, which will be my webcam. I like to have a scene which just contains my webcam. And part of the reason that I like to do that, I'm going to select my Keo Razor at high resolution, is that I have a couple webcams. Sometimes I don't have my external one with me, and I want to use my built-in laptop webcam. And by having everything built off of a raw camera scene, I only have to change my webcam location in one place. So if I wound up needing to switch everything to the FaceTime camera instead, I could just do this all in one place. So I'm going to lock that webcam source in the raw camera scene. And now I'm going to create a new scene called full screen camera. And what I'm going to add as a source in that full screen camera scene is I'm going to add the scene, which is an option in OBS, called raw camera. So I'm going to add my existing raw camera scene and lock that down. And what that means is that although these scenes look the same, I can add additional stuff to this full screen camera scene and not have to change my camera if I want to use my other webcam. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new scene, which I'm going to call Logo Overlay. And this scene is just going to contain an image. And that's going to be a new image, which is called the Babson logo, because I teach at Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And the image file that I'm going to add there is going to be from my Babson templates folder, and let's get templates, video templates, and this is a transparent PNG file, which I can lock down. And so now I'm going to go back to my full screen camera scene, and on top of that raw camera source, I'm going to add not an image. You could do it that way, it'd be a little simpler, but perhaps less flexible later. And so rather than adding an image, I'm going to add a scene, and the scene I'm going to add is the logo overlay. And I'll make that visible, and since sources get added from bottom to top, that's going to sit on top of the raw camera, and I'm going to lock that one down. Okay, so now I've got my main full screen camera scene that I'm going to use for recording intros or anywhere else where I just want to talk without having anything, other content on the screen, except that logo in the corner. And so now I'm going to add a new scene, which is going to be my Gary King inspired split, where I've got content on the left, and my video on the right cropped vertically so that students can see my face fairly big, but they can maximize the amount of content that's on the screen. So I'm going to build that up from scratch. I'm going to call that King Split, in homage to Harvard professor Gary King, who introduced me to this idea for a screen layout. And so that King Split scene, well, what am I going to put in there? The first thing that I'm going to put in there is I want to get my content over on the left-hand side. And so I'm going to do that with a window capture, depending what the shape of your content is, whether you have an external monitor, you could use a video capture device. If you had like a capture card coming in, you could use a display capture if you wanted to use a full screen external monitor where you were presenting PowerPoint slides or something like that. I'm going to use a window capture, and what's the window I'm going to capture? That's going to be a PDF that I just have open in Mac Preview. And what I have done is I've kind of adjusted the size of that window so that roughly the width of it looks like what I'd like to get in my scene. So I'm going to add a window capture. I'm going to add a new window capture, and I've got to find in this long list of the windows open on my computer the one that's called Preview. And I don't want to show the shadow. I don't I need to list windows with empty names. Okay, so now what I've got, of course, is a full screen. But wow, that thing is huge. It's actually going off to the right. And why is that source not even showing up? There we go. So that window capture, I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to click Transform. And I'm going to say, let's fit that thing to the screen. So this looks good, except that it's centered and I want it over on the left-hand side. So I'm going to right-click again, and I'm going to do Transform, Edit Transform. And then in the Edit Transform, here where it says Align in Bounding Box Center, I'm going to change that Align in Bounding Box Center to be center left. So you can see all the black bar now gets concentrated over on the right-hand side. So let me lock that down. That kind of looks the way I'd like it to be. Now I want to add my camera over on the right-hand side. So I'm going to add not my video capture device. I could do that. It would work. But again, I want that flexibility to have only added the webcam in one place in case I want to change it later. So I'm going to add a scene. And the scene I'm going to add from my existing scenes is going to be the full screen camera, which of course initially is just going to totally cover up my... you know what? Let's actually not do it that way. We could do it that way. I'm going to delete that full screen camera scene. And instead, I'm going to add the raw camera. And the reason is that I want to keep that logo down in the right-hand corner when I crop the left and the right-hand side out. So I'm going to add the raw camera, not the full screen camera. That obviously has totally covered up my window capture because it's on top. And so I'm just going to crop this from the left and the right, and you can do that by holding the Option key on the Mac as you drag. If you don't hold the Option key rather than cropping, it will instead rescale. And so I'm just going to crop in from the left and the right, and then I'm going to drag this over to the right. It should snap right into place, and I'm just going to adjust this by hand. I'm not doing this in any fancier way. I'm just going to adjust this by hand. There's a little bit of a black bar that I don't want, and so we'll just make this a little bit bigger. So hi, there I am. Looking okay. Let me lock that thing down, and then the last thing I want to do, just to be a little fancier, is I'm going to add another scene that's going to sit on top of this whole source, and I'm going to add the logo overlay, and so that sits on top. And I'm going to lock that one down as well. I always like to click those padlock icons on things that I don't plan to edit so that I can't drag them around by mistake. So now I've got the main scenes that I'm going to use to do my recording at the top. I've got the King split. I've got the full screen camera. I sometimes like to order them in the use that I'm going to use them so that I can change scenes just using the arrow keys going up and down on my keyboard. So there's the full screen camera scene that I'll use to record my introduction. And then I've got that King split scene that I like. And then just because I feel like being slightly fancy, I'm going to add a new scene, which is going to be my title card scene. And I'm going to put that one in between because after I introduce the video, I'm going to cut away to this title card. What am I going to put there? Well, I could put a variety of things. So one way to do this, if I want to use a title card scene, especially for the end, is I could put an image that has a full screen logo or something else that I've designed with a full screen that, I want to use at the beginning or end of my video, and that'll work fine. So I could switch from the full screen camera down to the title card and down to the King split. I'm just using the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard to scroll up and down. But I kind of feel like doing something a little fancy, and I have this video, bumper video that I've recorded. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to add what is this one called? It is called a media source, I think. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to add a local file, and that media source that I'm going to add is one that I've got stored on my hard drive. Where is it? Documents, OBS, Stein Finance bumper. So I've got this little video that is going to play audio, but you guys probably won't hear the audio through the microphone. It's this little animated thing. And you'll note the media source is now down here showing with its volume playing, and it looked like it was redlining on the audio. So I'm going to bring that thing down a little bit. And now I find that when I switch to the title card, that media source will start playing, and I can adjust the audio levels a little bit. I don't have my microphone showing up in OBS right now because I'm using my microphone to record the video, but otherwise it would be there. So that's how I record the video. I started here. I say, hi, I'm Luke Stein. Nice to meet you, blah, 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 blah. Hit the down arrow. And now you're going to see this video play, and the audio would go out to the recording, and then I can down arrow to the king split scene, which is where I do most of my discussion. And the only thing I would note is that when I'm actually recording the video for the students, I can move the OBS window over to the right-hand side. And so once I've hit start recording here and I've started recording the video, once I'm in the king split scene, I can just mouse on over here to the syllabus file, and I can scroll this up and down, and you can see there's a little bit of latency in the preview window on the right, although actually that latency does not seem as bad in the recording as it would otherwise be. Latency is always an issue with these OBS recordings, and so as long as you're recording static content, you generally don't have a problem, but I would note that if you're trying to record using screen capture stuff that has YouTube videos or PowerPoint animations or stuff like that, you might run into a problem.